Industrial Real Estate Show, and I'm pleased to be joined by a friend of mine who I've got to know quite well through the SIOR network, and he's also a YouTuber as well. So we're going to talk about some of his YouTube videos, and he actually has his own private jet that he features prominently in his videos, and it is awesome. It's a channel that you're definitely going to want to check out. But just really excited to jump into the background of Don's and just get to know him more and know a little more about his company. And of course, we're going to talk about the private jet. Don, thanks so much for joining me. It's good to see you again.
Chad, it's an honor. You are my YouTube mentor, and plus a tremendous friend and SIOR partner. So thank you for having me on your channel. You have a lot of esteemed guests on your channel. You are the best interviewer I know in the business, and so I'm honored to be invited to your channel.
Well, thank you for the kind words. I'm supposed to be praising you for all the cool stuff, so I thank you for that. It's been awesome hanging out together in the different cities that we've been at for SIOR. And the one thing that struck me as how cool you are right from the beginning is that you flew your own jet to these meetings. So let's tee it off there. Tell me the story of the jet.
Well, since being a kid, I've always wanted to fly, and when I was in the Army, we jump out the back of the planes or the helicopters, but I always said, "Boy, it must be cool to be the pilot." A little bit more cerebral than jumping out the back. And so later in life, after I became a real estate broker, one day I took a long drive. And it was like an 8-hour drive. And I saw these little Pipers and Cessnas taking off on this trip. And I said, damn, if I was a pilot and I had a plane, this would have been a 1-hour flight versus an 8-hour drive to this really beautiful area in New Hampshire. And when I came back from that trip, I started my flight lessons. And I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, it's probably more like 30, something like that. I got my private pilot's license, and I've been flying ever since. And it's a passion. It also gives me the adrenaline surge, though not so much anymore. I mean, it's still exciting, but it's not like an adrenaline surge. But when you're learning to fly, and the first time you solo, it's a bit of an adrenaline surge, that's for sure, that I missed coming out of the military. So. And I love the professionalism of pilots and air traffic controllers. And it's reminds me a lot of the professionalism of the unit I was in and the military, which I missed in civilian life. Mm-hmm. So I progressed from, having my private pilot's license. And after 2 years, I got my instrument rating. And I bought my first plane, which was a little 4-seat hot rod. And I right away started weaving it into the business. And at the time, we were doing a tremendous amount of work locally for Allstate Insurance. And word started to spread amongst the different regional directors of real estate. At the time, Allstate in each state had a director of real estate, about this guy who and his team who really performed. And that's one of our things. We can get into that. We've always been a small company with really high levels of performance for our clients. And that's what, if you're a small company, you frankly have to do that. And otherwise, you won't succeed. So high levels of customer service, and word spread. And one person in Virginia or New England would need our services. And we took our plane, and we'd get a call, and we'd be dispatching that day to, something that was 300 or 400 miles away, which was no problem for us. That was what we do. And subsequently, or during that time, I also broadened out my licenses. So now I'm licensed, I think, in 17 states, give or take. Oh. And pretty much up and down the East Coast, and all the way down to Florida, and all the way up and over to Texas. So weaving the two together are my love for flying and wanting to overservice the client, by being super quick, very thorough, and having aviation as an asset has always been a cornerstone of that. So much so that when we did our first brochure, which was many moons ago, my hair was black at the time, we featured right away the second plane which we had, which was a turboprop. And that certainly brought up our ability to go further and faster. And we had that turboprop for 18 years. It was a fantastic plane, Piper Meridian, and pressurized and reasonably fast. It did about 270 knots. So the speed of a King Air type of speed, which is really good if you have to go like 500 miles, 600 miles. But we used it to do deals all the way into Texas. Matter of fact, it was pivotal on a deal that we did for Coca-Cola. And I was meeting with Coca-Cola. This is a great true story. In their office in Atlanta, and on a Friday afternoon. And they mentioned that they had this building, which wasn't overly occupied in Houston. And I said, well, tell me more about it. And they said, well, it's not fully being utilized. I said, could you get me in there? And they said, when would you like to go? I said, today? And that is the advantage of having our own aviation assets and me being a pilot. And so literally I was there that afternoon, flew in, met with the business unit leader there, toured their building, and found that it was about 2/3 vacant. And it was a beautiful asset. I mean, just really, you could imagine Coca-Cola, they do things right. So they really maintain their buildings. And so I worked that weekend, found out all the comps for that building, realizing that they probably want to monetize this asset. It's languishing there. And printed a report at Kinko's that weekend, flew back to Coca-Cola in Atlanta on Monday, and presented the report of, here's your building, here's 30 comps, we can monetize this, let me do my thing. And we did. And to this day, the director of real estate, Ms. Lynn O'Brien, terrific lady, very well known in the industry. She's retired, a few years retired from Coca-Cola, but absolute dynamo. And brilliant. And her and I talk about that deal, and having the plane was definitely pivotal. And then we would go back and forth when we were selling that building. We ended up selling that building for much more than they expected. We hit a grand slam on it, and that building was about 230,000 feet, if my memory is correct. And then we took the people that they had in there, and we brought them over to Sugar Land, Texas for, I think it was about 120 or 130,000 foot 10-year tenant rep deal that we did for their office space. So we double whammied it, and it was all because, well, it wasn't all because the plane was a pivotal part. But yeah, long answer, but absolutely true story. And that's just one of many stories where aviation has played a big part in how we can service our clients and bring speedy, real value. And we ended up, hitting, like I said, when we sold that building, we completely blew through the expectations of what we'd sell it for. And same thing on the tenant rep deal. We got a fantastic build to suit for them that they loved. We actually ended up renewing it, and we were well below market on the tenant rep deal and way above market on the sale. So the plane has been and still is having that asset and that ability. It's also a skill set, the ability to fly it. Plus I have other pilots, of course. but I do fly it solo. And a few years ago, we migrated up to a beautiful 2-engine jet made by Honda. And we were early adopters of that jet. We spent about a year doing our due diligence on that jet. And we decided on the Honda jet, fantastic plane. And it was known within aviation circles, but not as well known as it is today. And so we were ahead of the pack. And I'm proud to say that about 4 months, 5 months after we bought a Honda jet, Tom Cruise bought one. So, of course, for him, it's play money. He's got many planes. He's also a very skilled pilot. I don't know if people know that, but he truly is. So I felt vindicated when Tom Cruise bought one. I don't know, it was just a minor thing. So to this day, we use that jet. We love it, and as you pointed out, yeah, I do fly to the conventions. We saw each other in Chicago, and I flew it from New York to Chicago nonstop, no problem. And the one before that, in Montreal, where you and I saw each other at the SIOR in Montreal. I have a very good video of the flight there on our YouTube channel, and it was a pretty crappy day, frankly, when I flew it in. And but that gets my juices going. I fly. I'm very safe, and I believe in judgment as the most important skill a pilot can have. But there's two things I'm good at in life, and I'm very happy. I'm not a great golfer. Don't play piano. But I'm really good at negotiating real estate deals, and I'm really good at flying. And that's my passion. So for those that want to see what it's like, come to our YouTube channel. We're posting a lot of flight videos. Of course, a lot of real estate videos too, everything from office space to warehouse space. But we have found that the people that might come to the channel to learn about what you and I do for a living, be it warehouse space or office space, we have found that those people do also like to watch the flight videos. So yeah, it's a tremendous tool, and it goes up to our current plane goes up to 43,000 feet, no problem. It loves it up there. So of course, it's pressurized, air conditioned, heated, and all that, and we can get into 10 times, if not more, the airports that you can get to through the airlines. Most people don't realize that the airlines at best, and this is before COVID, serviced here in the continental, in the United States, serviced about 600 airports. Now, some of those, there's a lot of flights into, like Chicago O'Hare, and then some, maybe one or two a day, like Roanoke, Virginia, is not going to get a lot of flights. And then after COVID, the airlines kind of cut back on a lot of those smaller airports. There's 6,000 paved strips in the United States, 6,000. So that's 10x. And we can get into most of those. So that's the other thing. It gives us the ability to quickly penetrate tertiary markets, second tier and third tier markets. And what we have found is a lot of our corporate clients might have their headquarters in the big city, but they have warehouses or back offices in secondary markets. So, and we can literally pick up the director of real estate or the CFO at the airport that's best for them, which, by the way, may not be Newark. No one wants to go to Newark or JFK unless you have to. They may live in New Jersey or wherever they live. It doesn't matter to us. And we can go to the airport that's closest to where they live, pick them up, bring them on a site tour, go see half a dozen buildings, maybe more, and fly them home, and they're home for dinner. So this is a long answer to your question,
It's a great answer though, because there's so many strings that I could pull on what you said there. And
Pull away.
I think the easy one, which a lot of people would just be fascinated with, you're the only broker that I know of that has his own private jet that flies people around. And the one question I had is that it's obviously got to be expensive to maintain. First, you have to buy the jet, then there's the storage and maintenance and fuel and everything that goes with it. So there's surely a sizable investment. My one question is it a return of investment that you get? But even hearing that one Coca-Cola story, I have to imagine that those two deals that you did off of that justified it, that yes, this works. One
Yeah.
deal gives you confidence that you can do this. And then I love the point too about all the tertiary markets, because those markets would commercially, you'd probably have to fly to one city and then fly to another one, or you're taking a car, whereas you can land on one of the strips and you're significantly cutting back the travel time versus flying commercially. So I think that's a huge value add that you would offer to your clients. I know that you also do charity runs as well. You've
We
done
do.
those. So
Yes.
can you tell me about those? Because I remember you mentioning that in Montreal, and I found that really interesting, and just another avenue on what you could do with having your own jet.
Yes. And thank you for asking about that. Yes. I love to do charity flights. I'm involved with an organization called PALS, and then they just changed their name to Sky Hope. It's kind of a better name. And where we'll pick up people that need what they say, well, life-changing medical care, and they either can't afford the transportation. They live in let's say, a really rural area. Um, you know, a lot of times we think of the U.S. as cities, but once you start flying, or even if you just go in the airlines and you look down, you realize that a lot of the country is very spread out and very rural. So, I'll fly up to Bangor. I'm thinking of one flight that we did. We actually filmed it. It's on our channel. And this mother and her son, the son needs, and a lot of these people, by the way, need, it's not just one visit. It's a recurring thing where they might go through years of care of some sort, and maybe a lifetime's worth of care. And if you live in Bangor, Maine, and you have a rare disease, well, you're probably going to go to Boston, or CHOPS in Philadelphia, or New York City. You're going to go to one of the meccas of care, um, that have the specialists that can handle those rare diseases. But most people don't live in Philadelphia or New York or Boston, and so they have to get there. And some people, they might need, believe it or not, 60 flights. They might need 100
Wow.
flights over a period of time. So, and most people certainly don't have the resources for that. And the airlines, getting there through the airlines, is brutal. A lot of times, you can imagine a mother and father, they'll do whatever they have to do for their children. They'll do an 8-hour drive, but down, and then an 8-hour drive back. So in the charities that I've done, and there's Angel Flight, there's another good one. And then the other one, which is near and dear to my heart, is Veterans Airlift Command. Um, did a lot of flights with them. Terrific organization. And they were primarily, or are primarily, servicing the wounded veterans. And by the way, from all countries, they just have to, like, one of my flights was, we had people from Ireland, of course, America, England, and these are wounded veterans who need to get to care, or sometimes they just want to get home for the holidays to go see their family. So this was really going on during the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and unfortunately, because of the IADs, EDs, explosive, improvised explosive devices, these veterans, they were lucky if they lost one limb. And these are tough but very rewarding flights. It's a real good use of wearing dark sunglasses if you don't want to show your emotions. So I'll just talk about, there's so many flights, but I'll talk about one in particular where I got a call the night before. They needed these guys were coming from Walter Reed, and there was like 20 of them. And again, the least wound was losing one limb, right? A lot of them had lost two. And I had one guy had lost four. And Netflix actually made a movie about him. Tremendous individual. And it was a privilege to fly him and his wife. But going back to this story, so I got this call, and something had happened where they had flights arranged, but it fell through. And now we had to arrange to pick up 20 of these veterans. And what were they doing? They were coming from Walter Reed to Long Island to ride. A lot of them were riding hand bikes because they had lost legs in an event to raise money for other veterans.
Wow.
And so I called some of my flying friends, and I'll try not to get choked up when I think about this. And we got together, a lot of pilots, and we picked them up and brought them to Long Island. But I still have some of the pictures, and I remember taking them back and flying them over, getting permission to flying them over what was the World Trade Center, and working that out with New York ATC. And the guy to my right, I still remember this guy, big guy from England. And these guys had such great attitudes, and he was all smiles. I was like, holy shit, it wasn't even their fight, so to speak. And but those, when you do those, they're very emotional, obviously, and the kids can, of course, we've done burn victims and cancer victims, and those are truly emotional flights. But like a good pilot, you never show your emotions. So dark sunglasses, and you're a pro, and you handle it. And one last quick story. One of the bravest guys I know, very good friend of mine, terrific air show pilot. This guy's had all kinds of air show, let's say, events, like, we just had to handle emergencies. And he came on that one flight where we had to pick up those 20 vets. And this is a very strong man, emotionally strong, fearless, absolutely fearless. And I in my military years, I've gotten to know true, fearless, brave people. This guy's right up there. And when he met, one of the passengers that he was going to take, and he got choked up, he told me he went to the men's room, did his little cry, came back, put his dark sunglasses on, put his poker face, pilot face on, and went out to the plane. And he found the guy. He didn't know how he did it. The guy didn't have legs, but climbed up on the wing and got himself into the plane. And that's my buddy Dave. And so when you do those flights, I'm sorry I got off on a tangent, you wear dark sunglasses. So, but the most rewarding flights, it makes it puts everything else in perspective. You know, we realize that our day-to-day problems, did I pay that bill? Did I get into a tiff with my spouse? Did my kids do their homework? You know, does this customer like me? Yeah, all that's, I hate to say, it's noise. It's bullshit. You know, when you're dealing with, when you go on these flights, I think that's one of the most rewarding things is it's like hitting the reset, and you, on the reset button on your emotions, you realize what really matters. What really matters is to people is their health. So yeah. Anyway, thanks for asking. We should talk about real estate or something else.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you elaborated on that, because I think that does show the value and the importance of using an asset like you have, which has done you well in business, but also using it for other causes, and not even from the humanitarian aspect, which is huge. Like, I'm sure that those families and the kids or the vets are eternally grateful for it. But just as you said, it's a way that you can give something back, and then
Yeah.
you get perspective on it. You can hit that reset button and really filter out noise versus what's actually important. So I'm very glad that you elaborated on that. But yes, let's talk more on real estate. But I wouldn't I that'll be a prominent section of this interview, because I really do appreciate you elaborating on that. On the real estate side, so you have a jet, a huge resource for the company. You're a
Yes.
small company. You're the only broker, I believe, right? But you have a full team
Oh,
of
I do. I have
around
a team. I just count. I think it's 9 people on payroll. So we're quite different.
that. Is
Most shops have, like, a small shop might have 8 brokers and 1 virtual assistant or two assistants. And I lost your video, chat.
it says it's still up on mine. Did it turn off, or is it still there?
Yeah, I mean, we could keep going, but
It does still actually record in the cloud. So even if it does show that it's gone, it still shows up in there anyways. And on my end, it's good.
okay. So where were we? Let me just get a drink.
So the average company might have 8
Yeah,
brokers and 1 support
yeah.
staff, and
So
you're
let
the
me start again. So yeah, our model is a little different. Um, we're very high levels of service. So I have Jason, has been with me 20 years. Rich has been with me, I think, 18 or 19 years. They know more about commercial real estate than, I dare say, most brokers I meet. They really know the ins and outs. And then I have Randy, who's a programmer. We have Liza. We have Jane, who's helping me write books. Jane is a tremendous asset as far as writing. We have Bruce, who's my videographer. Tori, he's a salesperson and a backup pilot. Geez, I hope I'm not leaving anybody out. Karen, who handles my books. I don't know. There's like 8 or 9 of us besides me. And the advantage of that is when we need to research something, my guys have the tribal knowledge, the skill sets, the technology. We're really geeky. We have all kinds of tech. Rich is a programmer, so is Randy, and they're not salespeople. So these people are on payroll, and so we do high caliber deals for high caliber clients, and they're bigger deals. We don't do the mom and pop type of deals, and we don't represent mom and pop type of companies. It just doesn't pencil for us. So our specialty is, I came from an elite military unit, and that's really my alma mater. And what I learned is a small team that's highly trained, highly focused, can do more than, let's say, a company of men, and that would be men and women. Um, yeah, you can do more if you're skilled, and so that's what we focused in on, is that it's a high level of service, and it's just like an elite military unit is not a lot of people. We compete against the big companies all the time. We actually relish that. And what we find is that there's some great brokers like you, and certainly in the SIOR, the big companies have their best of the best brokers. At least I like to think in the SIOR and or the CCIM. But the bigger the company, the more there's the bell curve of performance. It's just statistics. The bigger the statistical sampling, the more the bell curve is going to apply. So you got your top 2% in a big organization, then maybe another, notch of 3%, and then you start to get this bell curve, and then you got your laggards. With a small company, the statistical is not the group is not big enough for that bell curve to work. It's, again, statistics. And when you think about it, that's the Navy SEALs, Army Special Forces, Army Rangers, Air Force PJs, very elite, very small, right? But if you have a really, really important mission that it just has to be done, well, are you going to call the General Army, or are you going to call your Special Forces type of teams? I know, by the way, Canada's got some good Special Forces kind of operators. So, it depends on the mission. And so, I have patterned iOptimize Realty from my Special Forces background. And the Special Forces team is only 12 people, by the way, only 12. And but a Special Forces team can obviously do a lot, but you wouldn't use them for every mission. It depends. But if you had a really important mission, it's probably who the Pentagon's going to call.
Do you weave that into presentations when you're going up against a big company, or how do you leverage that to your advantage?
Yeah, we're not big on, like, I know like the CBREs, the JLLs, Cushman Wakefields, and such. They compete against each other, and they have these presentation teams. Where it cracks me up, from what I've heard and what I know, is they have specialty teams. Speaking about specialty teams, they have specialty teams that make presentations, but they're not the ones executing on the deal. So unlike yourself, you make a presentation and the person says, "Okay, let's go." You're the one that's going. They bought you, and they know you're right. Am I right about that, Chad?
Absolutely.
Right. So they bought your skill sets, your experience. And so we feel it's a bit disingenuous to have a presentation team, and then you sign on the dotted line and you find out, well, the person doing your deal is not the person you thought it was. It's some junior person who's got 2 years in the business instead of 10 or 20 or 30. And experience does count, absolutely, and as well as skill sets. We're not big on the flashy presentation. We're different. We really like to get in and know the customer, know their needs. We're not going to do the big dog and pony PowerPoint, and this is how great it cracks me up. I've spoken to a lot of and as you know, in working on deals, most of the properties are represented by, let's say, the big 3 or 4 or 5 brokerage firms. And so, we're obviously dealing with them, and they're on the landlord side. And it just sometimes it cracks me up of who I'm dealing with when the rubber really hits the road on the other side of the deal. And if the clients only knew. Um, so if someone interviews you, Chad, they're getting you. And that's the same thing with us. And we're not big on this presentation. I remember this one guy, and I won't mention the name, but it was one of the initials I mentioned before. And I called him up, and I was representing Coca-Cola, right? Pretty big name, right? We needed a few 100,000 feet of warehouse in New England. And the transaction manager for Coca-Cola was available on certain dates, like 2 weeks in advance. It wasn't like the next day. And I called up this broker, and he worked for one of those big companies. And I said, would you be available? I'm coming in with Coca-Cola to show. It was like a 200,000 or 300,000 foot warehouse deal to show the property that you have the exclusive on. And he says, no, I'm not available on those dates. And this was like 2 weeks out. I was like, oh man, maybe this guy's a real small shop, because it was up in New England. And I didn't look at I looked at the guy's name, but not the affiliation company. True story. And so I said, well, do you have a partner? I could understand, maybe the guy's got a medical appointment and he's a one-man band. Do you have a partner or someone that could show the property? And he says, we have 19,000 brokers in our organization. I was like, then I knew who it was. And I looked, and I was like, sure enough. And I was like, you have to be shitting me. So I mentioned it's Coca-Cola. We're not here to check the weather. Are you telling me you can't meet us on that day? And he was serious. Total pompous ass, by the way. Still is today. I hope he watches this video. So we're not big on the dog and pony show. We're big on getting to know the customer and their needs. That's our focus. And listen, when you're a small company, it is like salmon swimming upstream, right? To be honest, the easiest decision, but it's often the wrong decision for a big enterprise, big corporate client to make, is to hire the company that's got name brand recognition. It's the old, and some of your viewers will be old enough to remember this. No one ever got fired for buying IBM. Mm-hmm. This is when personal computers just first came out, and it was a truism. It wasn't. They weren't the fastest. They weren't the best computers. I was actually in the computer business at the time. I could tell you that for a fact. But there was job security. If you bought 50 IBM desktop computers, your boss said, "Attaboy" or "Attagirl," right? They weren't the best bang for the buck. And I would challenge anybody to look at their desk today and see if you are in front of an IBM computer. Mm-hmm. Probably not. The point being is that if we lose business, we lose it because of that effect, where it's not because we're not skilled. It's because a corporate client wants the name brand that they feel their CFO is very comfortable with. And I have clients being very honest with me. They'll give me one part of the deal, usually the tenant rep part, but like one of my good friends and former client, and he was working with a German company, and they were in bed with one of those brands I mentioned, and he says, "Well, I know you can sell this building for me, but I have to use that brand because parent company Germany is like in love with them." And I was like, okay. So that, getting back to the point, a dog and pony show, I would advise, if there's brokers watching this and they're in a small shop, independent shop, outservice the big guys and gals. And focus on your client's needs, not the dog and pony presentation. Focus on them. What's in it for them? what would move the needle for them? What will make them look good? What will save them money? What will save them time? And once you start doing that, and a lot of that's doing research. So if we're going to go in for a presentation, we will have researched everything that we can. We do that even just calling someone cold. It's not cold. We know a lot about their portfolio before we make that phone call. We know a lot about what's going on with their business, what's going on with their competition, and how we can add value. And frankly, if we can't add value, we're not making that call. So if we make that call, we know we can add value. We have to try to explain that to them. And some see it and some don't. And a lot of our clients, though, are very big companies. And if they give us a fair shot, they find that we outservice the big guys and gals. Can't say big guys anymore, right? Can't do that. And truth be known, it has changed, thankfully. I have 2 daughters, so I'm glad for that.
Likewise, I think that there's some great women brokers in this business.
Absolutely.
There's all ethnicities are succeeding in this business. Times have definitely changed. I love the point that you made, and I think that this is applicable for everybody, whether it's a small shop or even a large brokerage. That dog and pony show doesn't work. And if it does work, it's solely because, as you said, the company that was going to hire them was probably going to hire them anyways, based just on their brand name.
Yeah.
And I've completely changed my proposals over the years where it's entirely client focused now. So instead of all this fluff and
Yep.
white box template stuff about how great the brokerage is and how many deals, it's all about the client. Here's everything that we've uncovered about the property. Here's how we think we can position it to maximize the benefit for you. And it's all client focused. So I think that's a brilliant point, is that dog and pony show, these trumped up proposals that are just one big advertisement, are inefficient. So I love that point that you made about just focus on value. Where can you over service a client as opposed to making it just transactional and about the brokerage? I love that point. I know
Great.
you also have some specialized software too. Reoptimizer.
Yes. Yes.
What do you do with that one? What's the
Well,
advantage there?
we developed our own platform that lets, we call it Reoptimizer. And it's a play on the name. It's optimizing your real estate portfolio. Um, we can take in a client's portfolio, no matter how many sites we built it. It can handle thousands of sites. It doesn't matter, and it can handle an unlimited amount of expenses per site. It's kind of like a lease administration system on steroids, because the difference between Reoptimizer and a lease administration system is lease administration systems tell you what you owe. Reoptimizer tells you what you should be paying. And so how we do that is we can take in all the client's information for their leases. We can look at all their expenses and put it in the system. And then we could see what's coming up the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years out, and saying, let's benchmark that to market. And how do we do that? Well, we weave in our tenant rep services, and we do in-depth, unbiased market surveys. And unbiased is the other thing that's a cornerstone of iOptimize Realty. We are pure tenant rep. So we never represent landlord properties ever. We're not against landlord brokers. We're all for them. We each have our place. The landlord broker is there to professionally represent the landlord and their properties and advocate for them and get them, frankly, the highest price that they can and the best terms they can for the landlord. We come in as a pure, what we call a true tenant rep, and we eschew all landlord business. So there's always zero conflicts of interest. That's a cornerstone of our business, has always been. And we will go and survey the market. And we find often, compared to some of those big firms, we'll find 3 to 4 times the number of sites. Now, why is that? Well, we all know, Chad, you know, in the business, a lot of times there are a lot of conflicts of interest, and those brokers have exclusives with landlords, and they're like, oh shit, um, I have the exclusive with the landlord, and now I got this assignment to represent the tenant. How do I do that? Well, I'll go and put in my properties, of course. I have the exclusive, within a few more that makes it look kind of good. And then you get somebody like us that doesn't represent the landlord at all. We come in and surprise, we find 3 to 4 times the number of sites. We've seen this many times. And then we put that into Reoptimizer, and then we can put in not only just the base rent, but every expense, run it out with escalations or estimated inflation, which is, we hope is coming back down to 3%. We'll see. And so if you have one site, let's say your portfolio is, let's say, 50 sites, but we'll just take one as an example. And that one site, besides base rent and the escalations on base rent, has half a dozen expenses, right? You know, if it's a warehouse, it can have a dozen expenses. If it's an office, it can have, I don't know, 2 or 3, electric, pass-throughs. So we can look at all those expenses and look at how they escalate over the years. And then we can compare it to 30 alternatives. And it benchmarks what you have. Now, that's just one property to market. Now, if you could theoretically do that in an Excel spreadsheet, theoretically, okay, but you really can't. It's very intense. So our software, which we have at least 3, if not 4 patents on, SQL-based, can take unlimited amounts of information very fast, all, of course, online. It's SaaS, software as a service. It can handle that with the backend SQL database. And the data points get into the thousands, sometimes tens of thousands, even more. So that's just one property. Now, if you have 50 properties, and those all have associated expenses, and each one of those has 30 alternatives, you see how this, and each one of those alternatives has half a dozen to a dozen expenses. Actually, warehouses, as you know, because I know you're a great industrial broker, warehouse is much more complicated than office. And we actually did a course on a video course on what to look for in a warehouse. And it's much more in depth. There's many more things that you have to get right in a warehouse, as you know. That we almost take for granted. But in one part of the course, for instance, and I'm diverging, and I'll come back to Reoptimizer, I talked about the depth of the concrete, and it really turns out that people are walking on it, but do we think about how strong that concrete is? And it really has to do with, well, what's the load going to be that it's going to support? So in the video, I say, this is pretty dry stuff. I mean, it's kind of like selling coffins. It's really dry, right? And so I say in there, I said, this is pretty boring, honestly, except if it's your job and you needed 8 inches or 12 inches of concrete, and you picked a warehouse with 6 inches of concrete, and then we start putting in all the racking and all the weight, and guess what? It's not sufficient. Then it gets exciting. Well, frankly, the person that does that is looking for a new job. So, and so getting back, warehouse is more intense than most people realize. And warehouse has a lot of potential expenses because mostly it's triple net. So if you have one warehouse property and 30 alternatives, and each one of those alternatives has a dozen expenses, okay, so yeah, you could see how this starts to replicate out. So our software will handle that. It handles, I don't want to make this a commercial about Reoptimizer, but it really helps a corporate client, a CFO, a director of real estate, understand their portfolio, understand it also measures utilization. And how important is that? We were doing this 10 years ago. Now with the pandemic and the pandemic being over, office space in the CBD markets they're 50% occupied. Matters of fact, I know I sent you a draft copy and you endorsed my book. Thank you very much. We came out with a book. We're just putting it out to print this week. We're getting our authors' copies. Our book is called Surviving the Office Apocalypse. And there is a storm, like most people, I know, real estate insiders know, and it's starting to be talked about on CNBC, but there is a storm of brewing, and it's really going to pop in 2024. When you have, this is in the office market, not in the warehouse market. Warehouse market's just doing ducky, right? Everybody needs to compete with Amazon. And so warehouse is hot, hot, hot. Office, on the other hand, everybody figured out, hey, you know what? Really, we don't need that office. And a lot of companies don't, or they need it, 50%, 40% of what they thought. Their employees don't want to put up with an hour and a half commute in Atlanta or Chicago or New York. They don't want to put up with, in some of these CBDs, is rising crime rates. And with rising crime rates, there's also less services. Stores are closing. I was just watching this very sad video in New York, where Target was an anchor tenant for this area, which really needed the services. Because of the high theft problem, Target is closing, and they were the anchor. So, you take San Francisco, you take Portland, a lot of the retail that served the office clients, if you want to go out for a cup of coffee or a nice place for lunch, all of a sudden that place is closed. So the companies have to think, do I really want to put a gun to my prospective employees' heads and say, you must come into this area that used to work, but maybe doesn't so much. And with that, now this isn't all across the country, because the Sun Belt is just rocking it for the most part. And Chicago, Portland, I just mentioned, San Francisco. San Francisco, we did a video on this, had a 3%. Oh, my camera zooming. I'll stop that. It does that every time I raise my hand, and it does this AI thing. So let me stop the tracking, because it'll go. But San Francisco, before the pandemic, had a 3% vacancy rate. As you know, and I know, that's no vacancy, right? Mm-hmm. San Francisco, last we checked, we did a video on this, was pushing 30%.
Wow.
Incredible. So, and I know, people think landlords are rich, and frankly, a lot of them are. But the landlord's not making money until that building is about 85% occupied normally, right? It's not going to pencil. So now you take an office property that is now at 50% occupancy or 50% vacancy rate. Now, there's a new term of art, and we get into this in our book, Surviving the Office Apocalypse. By the way, if later you can share a link. Anybody is watching, any of your clients that's watching this, any of your subscribers, your constituents that wants a copy, later if you can, put in my email, just email me and we'll be glad to send it out. And I'm glad to say that you read it and endorsed it, and I appreciate that.
But I'm looking forward to a hard copy.
Yeah, and you're certainly going to get a hard copy soon, within the next 2 weeks. So the point being, it's simple math, right? You don't need an MBA. You don't have to bring out your spreadsheet. If normally a building starts to break even, let's say at about 85% occupancy, or 85% occupancy, and now they're at 50%, there's not enough money to support the mortgage, let alone all the ancillary services like security. Boy, would we want security now about now in these urban areas? Shit, yeah. Yeah, we'd want security. Oh, but wait. When the building goes into foreclosure, because it will, it's guaranteed to go in foreclosure. Because there's not enough money to pay the mortgage. And there's a real limit to the sense of humor of these big sophisticated landlords. They don't like losing money, as you know, and they'll lose it for a period of time if they think it's going to come back. But if they see that, yeah, it may not be coming back or coming back enough to support the mortgage, let alone them paying the ancillary bills, which are also important, and property taxes. Property taxes come first. Most people don't realize it cracks me up when the government said everybody should stay home, but the government, I don't know any government that said, oh, for those landlords, you can't, residentially, you can't evict anybody who's not paying rent. You can't do that. Not one government that I know of said, oh, but you know what? We're going to pause on property taxes, right? Did anybody do that?
Oh, not that I've heard of.
Right. So property taxes come first. Next comes paying the mortgage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if there's not enough money to pay those two things, stop there. Okay, the building is got one of two things are going to happen, which really is the same result. The landlords, the sophisticated big landlords, not the mom and pop landlords. I really feel sorry for the mom and pop landlords because they could get crushed. I mean, they could lose everything, all that they've worked for all their lives. But take your big landlords, right? They're non-recourse on those mortgages, right? So they're going to go back to they're going to go back to the bank and say, you know what? It's been fun. It just hasn't been real fun. Here's the keys. You can have the keys to the building. We're done. Okay. And if they don't, then eventually, now the banks, they don't want this. They don't want this on their books. So they're doing what we had in 2007, which was the extend and pretend. This isn't really happening. They're doing it now. They're going to do it. They have to try to do it to survive, right? But eventually they have to foreclose because they're not getting paid on the mortgage. They have to, right? And they'll try to do loan workouts, but at 50%, it's really tough. I mean, that might be the only option for a lot of these banks and some of these landlords that want to stay in it. But there's not enough money, even if they had the money to pay the mortgage, there's not enough money to pay for security. There's not enough money to pay for the office cleaning. There's not enough money to maintain and upkeep the building. And any asset, I don't care if it's a boat, a car, a plane, an office building, a warehouse building, if you're not continually maintaining it, it's degrading. And when it starts to degrade, it usually picks up speed eventually. First, it starts off almost imperceptible, but then it starts to pick up speed, right? And so, and it gets really bad. So the tenants in these buildings, what was ostensibly great for the tenant, I'm a tenant rep and I love negotiating for the tenant, but I always do believe that the landlord should make a profit, a reasonable profit. Because if the landlord doesn't make a reasonable profit, the tenant rep is not doing any service to their client, the tenant, because that building, this is in the happy times for office landlords, will go through foreclosure, right? Now, it's happy times for tenant reps, and for tenants, we can score really great deals. However, what we have to be aware of, if the landlord doesn't make profit, the building has to go into foreclosure. Now, what happens to the tenant? They're chained to a sinking ship. Can they get out of their lease? No, they can't. Maybe they could try for an aggressive prosecution of constructive eviction. Good luck in these urban areas getting through the court system. It'll take 5 years, right? So our book is all about what to do on any new lease, absolute safeguards, bumpers, so to speak, that you can put up that will protect you. things like SNDA, putting the TI dollars in escrow. It's all in the book. What do you do with your existing portfolio? And then we put in some suggestions there. Sometimes you can take action. It really depends on the circumstance. And sometimes you can't. But we think this is critically important. We don't think that most tenants realize that they too will be holding the bag, and they will be chained to the sinking ship, which is this office building that still has a leasehold estate. And when they get the call from the receiver, who's the court-appointed attorney, whose first job is to pay the taxes, second job is to pay the mortgage, when they get that call, right, that now to send the rent to them, they're going to think, well, can I get out of this lease? Receiver's not going to say, yeah, you can get out of the lease. Heck no, you're not getting out of that lease. Without that lease, I can't do what I have to do as the court-appointed receiver, which is to pay the taxes and the mortgage. So this is a very timely book. And so we'll be getting that out. It's coming. We're not going to put it out on Amazon. We don't think we are. We're going to send it to key CFOs, directors of real estate, any of your audience that wants a digital copy. They just have to email us, and we'll take care of that. Of course, you get the print copy. You get one first.
Love it.
So I went off on tangents, which I typically do. Reoptimize, I think we covered. It's there to literally optimize the client's portfolio. It gives them a dashboard, shows them where they're underutilizing space, shows them where they're overpaying for space. And anybody that signed a lease 2 to 3 years ago or 4 years ago, 5 years ago, guaranteed is overpaying for space, unless it's warehouse. Warehouse now, they're below market. Yeah, warehouse has done that on rents, and office is going, whoop.
Yeah, it's a tale of two asset classes, isn't it? They couldn't be further apart in the trajectory.
Yeah. I call it the Amazon effect. I don't know about you, but my wife says, about it every day or every other day. Some little package comes in from Amazon. I say, yeah, it's cables, it's cameras, it's microphones, GoPros.
I'm the exact same way. The studio that I'm in right now, I bet you almost everything in here came from Amazon. So I'm right with you.
Love them or hate them, Jeff Bezos and Amazon, can't live without them.
Isn't that the truth? I want to throw an idea out to you because we're coming up on in the hour here, and I promised you would keep it to an hour. I'd love to keep the conversation going, and I'm sure people watching would love to be able to ask you some questions. There's so many topics you brought up. We didn't even get into your military background, which I've heard the story before, and it's an awesome story. But the chat, your book, the software, how you approach deals, I think there's so many questions that would come up. So I'm launching a membership group next year. If you're up for it, I'd love to bring you on as a guest where the members can ask you questions and we could continue this conversation.
Yeah. And when you get to, you're younger than me, and but you're still very seasoned. But when you get to be at my point where you really want to give back. So I'd love to talk to young real estate professionals and how they can serve their clients better. So maybe in the next call, we touched on some things today, the right principles, put the client first. But yeah, I'd love to do that.
Okay. I'll also put in links to your YouTube channel. People need to go and watch your videos. You've got a wide array. We talked about the jet, but also just real estate and some tips and advice there. So people need to subscribe to your channel. And then I'll leave your website and your email if people want to reach out to get a copy of your book. I look forward to the next conversation already because I think we can dive even deeper into those topics. That hour went very quick for me, so I look forward to the next one already.
Me too. Likewise, Chad. Just let me know. I'm here for you, and love your channel. I watch it every day. Your channel rocks.
I appreciate that. Well, and it's a mutual respect too. I'm a big fan of everything that you're doing. And I guess we'll see each other in Florida, Amelia Island. I think that's in May, right?
Absolutely. And I'll fly the jet down there to Fernando Beach. We've actually already been there. Beautiful strip. That's a perfect example where I could get into within I won't say walking distance, but 2 miles away from the hotel we're staying at, the Omni, which I stayed at many times. So
Very cool. Okay, awesome. Well, Don, thanks once again. Look forward to the second call that we do next year, and we'll certainly be in touch as well.
very good, Chad. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks, Don.